The mysterious inheritance. Ethan Carter never expected to inherit anything. He was just an ordinary guy, working a boring job in the city, struggling to pay rent. But one morning, he received a letter that changed everything. It was from a lawyer, saying that his distant great-uncle, a man Ethan had never even heard of, had passed away and left him a massive mansion. Ethan thought it was a scam at first, but when he checked the lawyer's credentials, everything was real. A free mansion. It sounded too good to be true. With nothing to lose, Ethan packed his bags and took the long drive to the countryside. The road twisted through thick forests before finally opening to a massive iron gate. Beyond it stood the mansion, an ancient, towering structure covered in vines and shadows. As Ethan stepped out of his car, the air felt wrong. The place was too quiet, as if the whole world had paused. The trees didn't sway, the birds didn't sing. A chill ran down his spine, but he shook off the feeling and pushed the gate open. The mansion. Inside, the mansion was huge but abandoned. Dust covered the furniture, cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air smelled of old books and something metallic. He walked through the halls, flipping light switches. Some worked, some didn't. The walls were lined with old portraits of strangers, their eyes watching him as he moved. Creepy, Ethan muttered. Then something caught his eye. A door at the end of the hallway, locked with multiple chains and heavy bolts. Why lock one door in an empty house? He wondered. He tried pulling it open, but it wouldn't budge. Whatever was behind it, someone really didn't want it found. The first sign. As night fell, Ethan settled into one of the bedrooms. The bed was surprisingly clean, as if someone had been maintaining it. But something felt off. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard something. A soft whisper. Ethan sat up, heart pounding. It came from a hallway. Slowly, he got up, his footsteps silent against the wooden floor. He stepped outside and listened. Whispers, coming from behind the locked door. A slow thump followed, as if someone inside was pounding weakly on the wood. Ethan's stomach twisted. Was someone trapped in there? The discovery. Determined to find out, Ethan searched the mansion the next morning. In the study, he found an old carring with dozens of keys. He grabbed them all and returned to the locked door. His hand shook as he tested one key after another. Finally, one clicked. With a deep breath, he removed the chains and turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. A hidden staircase led downward, into what looked like a basement. A faint, strange glow flickered below. Ethan's heart pounded, but he stepped inside. The air grew colder with every step. The basement walls were lined with strange symbols, glowing faintly in the dark. A metallic scent filled the air, sharp and unnatural. At the bottom of the stairs, he saw a glass chamber. Inside it, a girl. She was curled up, pale silver skin glowing dimly, long dark hair falling over her face. Her eyes fluttered open, not human eyes, but bright violet, glowing softly. The moment she saw Ethan, she scrambled back, fear flashing across her face. She wasn't human. Ethan stared in shock. His mind screamed at him to run, to leave the mansion behind. But the girl pressed her hands against the glass, her lips moving silently. She looked desperate. She looked trapped. And Ethan knew, in that moment, that his life would never be the same. Who, or what, is she? Ethan Carter stood frozen, staring at the alien girl trapped inside the glass chamber. His heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be real. He had come to inherit a mansion, not uncover something out of a science fiction movie. The girl inside the chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her silver-toned skin glowed faintly, her long, midnight black hair falling over her delicate face. But her eyes, those glowing violet eyes, locked onto him with a mix of fear and hope. She placed her hand against the glass, fingers trembling. Ethan swallowed hard. He had to do something. The locked chamber. He moved closer, eyes scanning the chamber. It wasn't just some dusty relic. It looked advanced, with glowing blue circuits running along its edges. Strange symbols etched into the glass pulsed with a dim light, almost as if they were alive. Ethan's fingers grazed the controls on the side of the chamber. The buttons were unfamiliar, labeled in a language he couldn't read. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered. The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. She was trying to speak. He hesitated, then tapped on the glass. "Can you hear me?" She nodded quickly. "What are you doing here?" She raised her hands and gestured, trying to communicate. She pointed to herself, then to the chamber, then. She mined chains wrapping around her wrists. A prisoner. Ethan's gut twisted. Who had locked her in here? And more importantly, why? The mansion's secrets. Ethan knew he needed answers. Leaving the girl behind for a moment, he searched the basement. There were shelves filled with old journals, dusty documents, and strange metallic artifacts. One book, covered in black leather, caught his attention. It had a symbol on the cover, the same glowing markings that were on the chamber. Inside, the handwriting was messy, hurried. "She cannot be let out. If she wakes, they will come." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Who was they? And why did someone go through so much effort to keep her locked away? As he flipped through more pages, he found something chilling. A drawing of the girl, sketched exactly as she looked now. But the journal was over 50 years old. Ethan's breath caught. Had she been trapped here for decades? The escape attempt. He hurried back to the chamber, determination replacing fear. He had no idea what she was, where she came from, or what danger this might bring. But he couldn't just leave her there. "Hold on," he said, scanning the controls. The girl's violet eyes widened as she shook her head frantically, motioning for him to stop. "What?" Ethan frowned. "You don't want me to." Before he could finish, the basement lights flickered. A low, unnatural hum filled the air. The symbols on the walls flashed brighter, pulsing with energy. The girl pressed herself against the glass, fear in her eyes. She pointed upward. Ethan's blood ran cold. Something was in the mansion. A loud metallic creak echoed through the basement, the sound of a door opening somewhere above. Then, footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Someone else was here. Ethan froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. He wasn't alone anymore. He glanced back at the girl. She shook her head urgently, motioning for him to hide. Ethan barely had time to react before the basement door slammed shut, locking him inside. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber speakers, cold, emotionless. Containment breach detected. Lockdown initiated. Ethan spun around, heart racing. The alien girl pressed her hands against the glass, her eyes pleading. She mouthed a single word. "Run." The hidden truth. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as the mechanical voice repeated the chilling phrase. Containment breach detected. Lockdown initiated. The basement door slammed shut, metal bolts sliding into place. The soft hum of machinery filled the air as the strange symbols on the walls pulsed brighter, reacting to some unseen force. Ethan turned to the alien girl, his breathing unsteady. She pressed her hands against the glass, shaking her head frantically. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Above him, in the mansion. Heavy, slow, deliberate. Someone was up there. Or something. Ethan's throat went dry. He had thought he was alone, that the mansion was abandoned. But now, a cold dread settled into his bones. Whoever, or whatever, was inside wasn't human. A race against time. Ethan didn't have time to panic. He turned back to the chamber, his fingers running over the control panel. The girl shook her head desperately, trying to stop him. "You don't want me to open this," Ethan whispered. She shook her head again, pointing toward the door instead. Her violet eyes burned with urgency. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a breath. The girl pointed to herself, then to the walls, then upward. She was trying to say something. If she woke up, they would come. Ethan clenched his jaw. It was already too late. A loud thud echoed from above, followed by the groaning sound of wood and metal straining. Something was moving inside the house. Something big. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to hide, but his gut told him the girl was the key to everything. If she had been locked away, then she wasn't the threat. Whoever was in the mansion was. The awakening. Ethan turned back to the control panel, his fingers moving quickly over the strange buttons. The girl tensed, her breath catching in her throat. He pressed what looked like a release switch. A sharp hiss filled the air as the glowing symbols on the glass dimmed. The energy holding the chamber together flickered, then vanished. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the glass split apart, and a wave of cold air blasted out, sending a shiver down Ethan's spine. The alien girl collapsed forward, her body weak from what must have been years, decades, of captivity. Ethan barely managed to catch her before she hit the ground. Her skin was cold. Too cold. But she was breathing. Her violet eyes fluttered open, locking onto his. And for the first time, she spoke. Ethan. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His name. She knew his name. The mansion's guardian. Before Ethan could say anything, a metallic screech tore through the mansion. The floor vibrated, dust raining down from the ceiling. Something was coming. Ethan grabbed the girl's arm. "We need to go." She staggered, still weak, but nodded. Together, they rushed toward the door, but it was still locked. Ethan cursed under his breath, his hand searching for a way to open it. Then the girl raised her hand. A soft purple glow surrounded her fingertips. She pressed her palm against the door, and the metal bolt snapped open with a deafening clang. Ethan barely had time to react before the door swung open on its own. They stepped into the hallway and stared straight into the glowing red eyes of a monstrous figure. Ethan's breath stopped. The thing blocking their way was massive, at least 7 feet tall. Its body was covered in black exoskeletal armor, its face hidden beneath a smooth, featureless mask with glowing red slits for eyes. It didn't move. It just watched them. Then, in a low, inhuman voice, it spoke. "Subject has been released. Initiating termination protocol." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Run," the girl whispered. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed her wrist, and they ran. The first attack. Ethan's legs burned as he sprinted through the dark corridors, his heart hammering in his chest. The alien girl, weak from years, decades, of captivity, stumbled beside him, her breathing ragged. But neither of them had time to stop, because behind them, the thing was coming. The sound of metallic footsteps echoed through the hall, steady, unhurried, like a hunter toying with its prey. "Subject has been released. Initiating termination protocol." The cold, synthetic voice repeated itself, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. It was hunting them. The mansion turns against them. They twisted down a hallway, but Ethan's mind screamed he didn't know this house. He had only just inherited it, hadn't even explored half the rooms. Now, in the dark, the corridors stretched longer than they should, shadows shifting in ways that made his stomach turn. The mansion was wrong. Ethan didn't understand how, but he could feel it. Where do we go?" he panted, glancing at the girl. She was barely standing, her silver skin slick with sweat, her violet eyes flickering with dim light. But she lifted a shaking hand and pointed toward the end of the hall. Ethan didn't argue. He barreled forward, dragging her with him, just as a wall of red light erupted behind them. A force field. Ethan whipped around, his stomach twisting. The figure in black armor was on the other side, standing perfectly still. Then it raised a 4-fingered hand, and suddenly, the red light of the force field began creeping toward them, like a trap closing in. No escape. The mechanical voice sent ice through Ethan's veins. The girl's grip tightened on his wrist. "Go." She pointed to a door ahead, one he hadn't noticed before. Ethan didn't question it. He lunged for the handle, throwing it open, and the two of them fell through. The forgotten bunker. They tumbled down a set of metal stairs, the door slamming shut behind them. Ethan landed hard on his side, pain jolting up his ribs. The girl groaned beside him. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the force field's glow vanished from under the door. The footsteps stopped. The thing in armor hadn't followed. Ethan sucked in a breath, trying to calm his pounding heart. The air down here was different, colder, almost sterile. He blinked, his eyes adjusting, and his breath caught. The room was massive, not a part of the mansion at all. It looked like an underground bunker, walls lined with machines, old monitors, and strange metal crates covered in symbols that matched the ones on the girl's chamber. Ethan pushed himself up. What is this place? The girl struggled to sit, her body still weak. She looked around, her expression unreadable. This was a prison, she whispered. Ethan stared at her. A prison? Then he saw it. At the center of the bunker, half buried in dust and cables, sat another glass chamber, identical to the one she had been trapped in. And inside it, something else was sleeping. The second containment. Ethan's skin crawled as he stepped closer to the chamber. This one was larger, the glass thicker, the symbols on its surface still glowing faintly. Through the frosted glass, he could barely make out a shape, long-limbed, humanoid, but wrong. Unlike the girl, whose form was almost human, this thing inside looked monstrous. Ethan turned to her. Is that another one of your kind? Her hands curled into fists. No. A sharp metallic screech made them both whip around. Above them, something slammed against the bunker door. The thing in armor was still up there. It was waiting, hunting them. Ethan swallowed. They were trapped. And whatever was inside this second chamber might be their only way out. The choice. Ethan's mind raced. He had already freed the girl, and that had triggered something. The mansion was alive with danger now, and the thing hunting them clearly had orders to kill. So what was this thing? Why was it locked up separately? Ethan turned back to the controls beside the chamber. They were similar to the girl's. A single switch stood out, a label beneath it, written in a language he didn't recognize. But next to it, one word was written in English. Weapon. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The girl tensed behind him, gripping his sleeve. Don't. He glanced at her. Why not? She shook her head, her expression dark. Because the people who locked me away feared me. She looked at the thing in the chamber. They didn't fear it. Her voice lowered to a whisper. They worshipped it. The decision. Ethan's mind spun. Above them, the hunter waited. The mansion wasn't safe, and now he had a choice. Risk everything to release whatever was inside the second chamber, or find another way out before the thing upstairs decided to come for them. Either way, Ethan knew this night was far from over. The chase begins. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes locked on the glowing word beside the chamber's release switch. Weapon. His mind screamed at him to make a decision. The thing in armor was still above them, waiting, hunting. The alien girl beside him, Ryla, as she had finally whispered her name, looked terrified. And inside the second containment unit, something slept. Something not human, not like Ryla. Something the people who built this place had worshipped. Ethan's fingers hovered over the switch. Would this thing save them, or destroy them both? Ryla gripped his wrist, her touch colder than before. Don't, she said, her voice trembling. It's worse than him. She meant the armored hunter. Ethan clenched his jaw. His gut told him she was right. They needed another way out. The hunter breaks in. A low mechanical growl vibrated through the bunker walls. The bunker door above them trembled. The sound of claws or metal scraping against steel sending a shiver down Ethan's spine. Then, boom, the door dented inward. Ethan grabbed Ryla's arm and pulled her away from the chamber. "We have to go now." She stumbled, still weak, but nodded. Ethan scanned the room, searching desperately for another exit. The bunker was huge, filled with old machines, forgotten consoles, and crates stacked against the walls. Then he saw it, a metal vent shaft, large enough to crawl through. It was half hidden behind a collapsed shelf, but it was open. An escape. Ethan turned to Ryla, pointing. "There, we can." Boom. The bunker door ripped open, torn from its hinges in a shower of metal shards. Ethan whirled around and froze. The armored hunter stepped inside, its glowing red eyes cutting through the dim bunker light. It moved slowly, deliberately, like it knew they had nowhere left to run. In one fluid motion, it lifted its arm, and a weapon unfolded from its wrist. A sleek, black rifle, humming with a sickly blue energy, locked onto them. No more running. Then it fired. Desperate escape. Ethan barely had time to react. He shoved Ryla toward the vent, throwing himself after her just as a blast of energy exploded against the ground. The entire bunker shook, sparks raining from the ceiling. Ethan hit the floor hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. The hunter didn't miss twice. Another shot came, this time aimed directly at him. But before it could hit, Ryla turned. Her eyes flashed with a deep violet glow, and she raised her hands. The blast of energy froze midair, suspended by an invisible force, before it suddenly shattered apart like glass. The hunter tilted its head, almost, analyzing. Awakened, Ryla grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him toward the vent. "Go, now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He scrambled forward, pushing himself into the tight metal tunnel, dragging Ryla with him. The space was cramped, suffocating, but they had no choice. Behind them, the hunter moved forward, reaching into the vent. And just as Ethan's feet disappeared inside, the hunter's hand grabbed his ankle. A fight in the shadows. Ethan kicked out violently, his heel slamming against the armored fingers. Nothing. The grip tightened. Then, a flash of violet light. Ryla's hands glowed, and suddenly, the hunter's fingers snapped open like it had been burned. Ethan yanked himself free, dragging Ryla forward. They crawled desperately through the metal tunnels, the sound of the hunter's mechanical growl echoing behind them. Then, Ethan spotted a shaft of light ahead. An exit. He didn't think. He lunged forward, kicking open the grate, and both of them fell through. A new threat. Ethan hit solid ground, groaning as pain shot through his shoulder. Ryla landed beside him, struggling to push herself up. For a moment, they just breathed. Then Ethan looked around. They had fallen into another hidden chamber. But this one was different. Unlike the bunker, this room felt ancient, almost like a temple. The walls were covered in alien symbols, some glowing soft gold, others faded with time. Floating orbs of light hovered above them, casting a strange, unnatural glow. And in the center of the room, a doorway. Ethan frowned. It wasn't just a normal door. It was massive, reaching the ceiling, carved with swirling patterns that pulsed with energy. A portal. A way out. Ethan turned to Ryla, but her face had gone pale. She was staring at the markings on the door, her hands trembling. "This isn't a way out," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She swallowed hard. "This is where they came from." Ethan's stomach dropped. Before he could ask who, something shifted behind the portal. A shape. Something stirred. And then, the doorway began to open. Power unleashed. The portal cracked open, releasing a wave of cold air that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. The golden symbols on its surface flared to life, pulsing like a heartbeat. And from the darkness beyond, something stepped through. Ethan barely had time to react before Ryla seized his arm, yanking him back. "Run." But Ethan was frozen. His mind refused to process what he was seeing. A figure emerged from the portal, tall, inhuman yet eerily familiar. It stood at least 8 feet high, its silvery skin smooth like liquid metal, shifting with every movement. Its face was featureless except for 2 glowing white slits where eyes should be. And yet, somehow, it looked right at him. Ethan felt something stir deep in his chest, a strange pull, a connection that made his skin prickle. He knew, without understanding how, that this thing knew him. At last, it whispered, its voice layered, as if multiple voices spoke at once. The last hair awakens. The hunter returns. A violent explosion shattered the moment. The ceiling above them caved inward, dust and debris raining down as a dark figure dropped into the room. The hunter had found them. Ethan barely had time to pull Ryla aside before a beam of blue energy sliced through the ground where they had just been standing. The hunter landed in a crouch, slowly rising to its full height. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan and Ryla. Hostile confirmed. Extermination protocol activated. The thing from the portal turned its head toward the hunter, studying it. Then it turned back to Ethan. "You are not ready." Before Ethan could question what that meant, the being lifted one shimmering hand. And the portal began to close. "Wait," Ethan shouted, stepping forward. "Who are you? What do you mean not ready?" The being hesitated for the briefest moment. Then it spoke 3 words. "Find the archive." And with that, it vanished into the closing portal, leaving Ethan and Ryla alone with the hunter. The fight for survival. The hunter wasted no time. It lunged forward, its black armor shifting like liquid, reshaping itself into razor-sharp blades along its forearms. It moved too fast, almost a blur. Ethan barely had time to shove Ryla aside before the hunter swung at him. The blade missed his throat by inches, cutting through the air with a sharp hiss. Ethan rolled to the side, his heart slamming against his ribs. He had no weapon, no way to fight this thing. The hunter turned toward him, red eyes narrowing. Ethan braced himself for the end. But before the hunter could strike, a wave of violet energy blasted through the room. The force hit the hunter hard, sending it crashing into the far wall. The impact cracked the stone. Ethan turned, wide-eyed. Ryla stood behind him, her eyes burning with violet fire. Her silver skin shimmered, her hands raised, glowing with raw power. She wasn't weak anymore. "Stay away from him." The hunter slowly rose from the rubble, its armor hissing as it repaired itself. Its glowing eyes analyzed Ryla in silence. Then it spoke, its voice deeper now. "Confirmed. Subject. Evolved." The hunter charged. Ryla didn't hesitate. She thrust both hands forward, releasing a shockwave of violet light. The energy slammed into the hunter, forcing it back. Sparks flashed across its armor, the red glow of its eyes flickering. But it kept coming. Ethan knew this wasn't a fight they could win. They had to get out. Then he remembered the portal's words. Find the archive. The mansion. This place wasn't just his inheritance. It held secrets, answers. And if they could find the archive, maybe, just maybe, they could stop whatever was happening. Ethan grabbed Ryla's hand. "We have to go." She hesitated, her energy still burning around her, but she nodded. Together, they turned and ran. The hunter didn't follow. Instead, it watched them disappear. And then, slowly, it tilted its head. Let them run. The hunt has only begun. The mansion's true purpose. Ethan and Ryla burst through the tunnels, finally reaching the hidden passage that led back into the mansion. The house was different now. The lights flickered eerily. The walls felt alive. And suddenly, Ethan understood. This mansion wasn't just an old house. It wasn't just a hiding place. It was something much bigger. Ryla gripped his arm. "We need to find the archive." Ethan nodded. Because he knew, whatever had started here, it wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The final stand. Ethan and Ryla raced through the dark corridors of the mansion, their footsteps echoing off the walls. The house had changed. The air was heavier, the halls longer, the shadows deeper. It was as if the mansion itself was alive, shifting and warping around them. Behind them, somewhere in the tunnels below, the hunter was waiting. Not chasing, not rushing, waiting. Ethan knew what that meant. It didn't need to hurry. It knew they had nowhere to go. But Ethan had one last hope: the archive. Somewhere in this house, his ancestors had left something behind. Something the portal being had called the archive. A final piece of the puzzle. A key to survival. And if they didn't find it soon, the hunter would. The mansion's secret. The deeper they went, the more the house began to change. The walls grew smoother, shifting from cracked plaster to something metallic, almost like a spaceship's interior. The old chandeliers flickered with blue energy and strange symbols. The same ones Ryla had been locked behind, glowed faintly along the ceiling. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "This isn't just a house," he whispered. Rayla, her violet eyes scanning the walls, nodded. "No, it's more than that." She placed her palm against the metallic wall. It hummed beneath her touch, reacting to her presence. And then, a section of the wall slid open. A hidden doorway. Beyond it, a massive chamber, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The archive. The room was enormous, filled with floating displays, ancient consoles, and what looked like holographic books hovering in the air. The walls were lined with crystal-like panels, flickering with images and data in an unknown language. At the center of it all, a single pedestal stood, holding something small but powerful. A silver cube. It pulsed with golden light, symbols shifting across its surface like a living thing. Ryla stared at it, her breath catching. "That's it." Ethan frowned. "What is it?" She turned to him. "Answers." Ethan stepped forward, reaching for the cube. And the moment his fingers touched it, the entire mansion shook. The truth revealed. The lights flickered violently. The air thickened, humming with energy. And then, a voice echoed from the cube. "Ethan Carter. Bloodline confirmed." Ethan froze. The cube knew him. "You are the last heir of the Watchers, the guardians of the rift between worlds. Your family was chosen to protect the knowledge within this archive. But the war changed everything." Ethan's mouth went dry. "War?" The cube pulsed again. "Between two ancient forces, the ones who built this place, and the ones who seek to destroy it. The creature that hunts you is part of the latter." Ethan's stomach twisted. The hunter wasn't just a random soldier. It was part of something much bigger. Ryla stepped forward. "What about me?" she whispered. "Why was I locked away?" The cube flickered. "You are the last of the exiled, a survivor of the lost civilization that once ruled the stars. The Watchers saved you, but they knew if you woke up, the enemy would come." Ethan turned to her. "They weren't keeping you prisoner," he realized. "They were hiding you." Ryla's eyes widened. But before either of them could say another word, the room went dark. The final battle. A low, mechanical growl echoed through the archive. Then, a red glow flickered to life in the entrance. Ethan turned just in time to see the hunter step inside, its armor gleaming in the dim light. It had found them. Mission complete. Archive located. The hunter raised its arm. And this time, instead of a rifle, its entire forearm split apart, transforming into a pulse cannon. Ethan barely had time to push Ryla aside before a blast of blue energy erupted from the hunter's arm, shattering one of the floating consoles. Ryla staggered back, eyes flashing. "I won't let you take this place." The hunter tilted its head. "It is already ours." And then, it charged. Ethan had no weapon, no armor, no way to fight. But Ryla did. She lifted both hands, and the air around her exploded. A wave of violet energy surged forward, slamming into the hunter with bone-crushing force. The creature stumbled, its armor sparking. But it wasn't enough. It recovered instantly, moving faster than before. It grabbed Ryla by the throat and slammed her into the ground. She gasped in pain, her energy flickering. Subject: neutralized. Ethan's vision blurred with rage. No, not this time. Something ignited deep inside him. A power he didn't understand. A legacy buried in his blood. The cube in his hands flared with golden light, and suddenly, the symbols on the walls shifted. The entire mansion responded to him. Ethan felt energy surge through his veins. The hunter turned toward him, its red eyes scanning him. For the first time, it hesitated. Correction. Bloodline. Activated. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes burning with light. The mansion had chosen him, and he was done running. The endgame. The hunter charge. But this time, Ethan was ready. He lifted a hand, and the walls came alive. A surge of golden energy erupted from the archive, wrapping around the hunter like chains of pure force. The creature struggled, its armor cracking, but Ethan tightened his grip. Not this time. With a final, explosive burst of energy, the hunter was consumed in light, and then it was gone. Silence. Ethan stumbled, the power fading. Ryla coughed, pushing herself up. She stared at Ethan, her violet eyes filled with something new. Awe. You awakened it, she whispered. The power of the Watchers. Ethan took a shaky breath. Yeah, I think I did. A new beginning. The mansion was silent now. The enemy was gone. For now. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. He turned to Ryla, gripping the cube tightly. Whoever built this place, they left something behind. Ryla nodded. And now we have to find out what it is. Ethan exhaled. He had inherited a mansion and discovered an alien girl inside. Now his life would never be the same. Not today. Not ever. And somewhere, in the farthest reaches of space, something else had begun to awaken.